These are 3 easy keto recipes, each under 15 net carbs. Let's make them. Our first dish is Shakshouka. This is a Turkish dish, and to cook this, you will need 1 red bell pepper, 1 tomato, 1 tablespoon of an oil of your choice, 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, canned or otherwise, and 2 whole eggs. I also like to add in 6 little mozzarella balls. I use the Belgioso ones you can find at Costco. So you're going to want to cut up your red pepper. You'll want to cut it lengthwise and then cut it in half once after that so you get small strips. Then you're going to want to cut up your tomato. Just dice it finely. That should do just fine for this. You don't want big chunks of your tomato. They're going to cook down into the dish. And then once you have your tomatoes and your red peppers chopped, we are going to saute our red peppers before adding the tomatoes in. Cook them separately. Pour in your oil over medium heat. Let that heat up and then add your red peppers. You're going to want to saute them until they get nice and soft. Once you reach that point, you're going to want to add in your tomato and your tomato paste. You're just going to want to scoop that tomato paste right in there on top of the tomatoes and the bell peppers, and then you're going to want to season it all together before mixing it up and having it cook together. So I start with some MSG, some paprika, some crushed red chili flakes, and then some salt to taste. I like it salty. Then you're going to want to mix that together. Mix it very well. You want the tomato paste to be throughout the whole dish. And then once you've mixed it, you're going to want to make 2 little divots. This is where you're going to put the egg, and you're going to put 1 egg in each little divot that you make. After the eggs have been put in, then I put in the mozzarella cheese, and I like to shred it up by hand and spread it evenly around the dish. This gives it just the most incredible cheese bowl when you actually eat it, and then put a lid on this so that the eggs can cook. The eggs will basically steam themselves, as you can see, and then it is ready to be plated and eaten. Here are the macros for the dish. 12 net carbs, 35 grams of fat, and 23 grams of protein. So our next recipe is cucumber kimchi and Keto Loco Moco. And for this recipe, it might not sound like it's very keto friendly, but if you don't eat all of the kimchi in one sitting, it ends up being all right. And so what you're going to want to do is grab half of a cucumber, cut them into circles, and then cut those circles into quarters. And so it ends up being a decent bit of carbs if you have kimchi with it. However, it makes a lot when you just do even half of a cucumber. You could split this into 2 or 3 servings, and that brings the net carbs down to a very manageable amount for the keto diet. And so once you cut them, you're going to want to put them in a bowl and salt them heavily. The salt is supposed to draw out the moisture that's already in the cucumber. So it's very important that you do this and then let them sit for about 30 minutes in the salt so that the moisture can be drawn out. After 30 minutes, you can see there's quite a bit of water there at the bottom of the bowl. Next, for our wet ingredients, you're going to want to start with 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. This is very important. This is what gives it all of its flavor. You're also going to want to add in a teaspoon of soy sauce, a soy sauce of your choice. I'm using less sodium. You can really use whichever one you want. It doesn't really matter. And then 1 tablespoon of vinegar. As we move on to our dry ingredients, one of them is gochujang powder. And if you don't live anywhere near an Asian market, what you can do is grab some crushed red chili flakes, toss those into a blender or a food processor. And then if you put that on its max speed, you will eventually get a powder that basically works as a substitute for gochujang powder. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but this is what's going to provide the heat and a little bit of flavor to your kimchi. It does get pretty spicy, so if you have a low spice tolerance, maybe don't do a full tablespoon of the red chili flakes. It does get really spicy, if I'm being honest, especially when you're blending it. Be careful that you don't inhale any of it. But then you're going to want to add a tablespoon of brown sugar to that, and those are your dry ingredients. Mix your wet and your dry. You're going to want to mix that up very well so that it all gets combined. And then once you have mixed that up to a good consistency, at that point, then you're going to want to add your spicy mixture to the cucumbers, and you're going to want to let those cucumbers sit for another half hour in their spicy marinade. This will help them soak up the flavor, and it's going to be delicious. You got to trust me. And it pairs very well with the Loco Moco. And so, speaking of which, you're going to want to start with some cauliflower rice and a tablespoon of an oil of your choice. I'm going with frozen cauliflower rice, but you can also toss fresh cauliflower in a food processor or ricer to get the same effect. This pale mystery meat is a hamburger patty. It was frozen. I got it from Costco. You can use it fresh, frozen, whatever. The macros I have are going to be based off of this patty though. Then you're going to want to take your cauliflower rice, and you're going to want to put your hamburger patty right smack on top of there, just like that. And we are not finished with the toppings yet. You're also going to want to take a fried egg and put that fried egg on top of that. And there you have your Keto Loco Moco. No gravy, which it's traditionally served with, but at least it's keto this way. Here's the macros for this dish. All right, for our last recipe, we have Keto Fat-bombs. These are great for when you just can't hit your fat for the day. So we have 200 milliliters of heavy whipping cream, 1 sugar-free Jell-O pudding pack, a stick of cream cheese, a stick of butter, stevia to taste, and then half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. For this, you're either going to want a stand mixer or a hand mixer. It is going to be very necessary because we are going to whip all of these ingredients together until they are combined and fluffy. I'm using a stand mixer here. And the flavor of Jell-O pudding that you use doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be Jell-O as long as it is sugar-free pudding. You can use any flavor. This time I use pistachio, but I've also used cheesecake and banana pudding in the past. So far, the pistachio one has been my favorite. I would highly recommend going with that flavor or the cheesecake one because it really does taste like cheesecake once you have everything mixed together. So it kind of hits your sweet tooth a little bit while also being very low carb and helping you hit your fat goals for the day. So you'll know it's done when it starts to look nice and fluffy like this, and then you can move it to another bowl. And I like to put it into little popsicles and freeze them, but you could also just eat this just how it is. You could weigh out a serving and eat it like that. But I think the popsicles is fun. It's kind of like an ice cream replacement on keto. So I think it works very well. And these are loaded with fat and they're low in protein and carbs. So they're a great option. Here are the macros for a 50-gram serving size. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed our 3 keto recipes. We will see you guys in the next one.